for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. My name is Darren Gibson, and I'm your co-host.
I'm Katy Steele.
And I'm Jack Prince.
Hey, thank you for joining us again today, Jack. We got to get you in person sometime soon here. We miss seeing your face.
True.
Nothing,
Been too long.
nothing you're missing there, but I do enjoy being with you guys.
Oh, God. Are you trying to say you've got a face made for radio?
Yeah, quite frankly, I do.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, I've said that about myself for years. You knocked that off. Oh boy! Well, we got to laugh in these hard times, and we'll talk about some of the hard times going on here in just a minute or two. Before we get started, a couple of reminders. You can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. You can follow us on Twitter at Southpaws Radio. You can follow us on Tumblr, southpawsradioshow.tumblr.com. You can follow us on YouTube by doing a search for Southpaws Radio. You can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime you like at Spreaker.com or at Stitcher.com. Do a search for Southpaws there. You can find us on Apple Podcasts by doing a search for Southpaws. Once you found our logo, you found us. Links to our podcast are sent automatically each week to our Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and YouTube accounts. You can listen to us every Saturday night at 11 on Global Community Radio Channel 1. And you can listen to us on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI-FM in Taos, New Mexico, KZGM in Kabul, Missouri, and WOOL, Bellows Falls, Vermont. So make sure you listen to us there. Make sure you help out your local Pacifica stations, either with donating your time or your money, because they can all use it. Let me just tell you. Before we get started with the topics, I've got a correction from last week, and then I've got an update to a story we talked about a few weeks ago. The correction: I gave the wrong figure when talking about the number of votes that Donald Trump requested from the Georgia Secretary of State. I said 17,800. The actual figure was 11,780. So, yeah, off a little bit there. And the big update, we talked a few weeks ago, Katy, you and I, about the farmer strike in India. Well, I just read, I believe it might have been BBC. I forget where I saw it, but the India Supreme Court is suspending the new farming rules for the time being. So this is very good news for the farmers there.
Yeah, which is the majority of their economic foundation, right?
Yes,
Agriculture.
exactly.
Right.
And they came out by the hundreds of thousands to protest the new rules. So
Good for them.
good for them. Peaceful protest works. So I think the Republicans, the conservative whack jobs, right-wing crackpots need to take a page out of that book and go from there. Speaking of which, we might as well just get right into everything. Things have rapidly changed in the last week or so.
Yeah.
Since we've gone off the air last week, and by the way, we are recording this show on Friday, January 15th, 2021. So some of you won't hear this show until the day of the inauguration, so we apologize in advance there. But a lot of things have changed. Facebook and Twitter have kicked Donald Trump off permanent, forever, especially Twitter. They have banned him for life, basically. Google Play and the Apple App Store got rid of the Parler app. Then Amazon kicked Parler off of their servers, so there's no more Parler. So interesting stuff here. As I said last week, the status quo will win, and they've decided they've had enough.
It seems to have ignited a debate regarding the First Amendment, which is basically being incited by the fact that nobody understands the First Amendment, and they all think that everybody is held to those standards. They don't understand that it's the government that's held to the standards of, not invading on your free speech. So everybody's going, this is discrimination, and you can't do this, and you can't do that. Well, where were all these people when it was ladies' night at the club, and they were letting 800 women in and 2 guys? They were not complaining about, their civil rights being violated then.
Yeah, exactly. No, the reading of the Constitution, the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law. It does not say Facebook shall make no law.
Right. Private businesses have always had that right.
Yeah. Whether it's right or wrong, that is their absolute right to do. Now,
isn't that what they fight for when somebody wants to make a cake for a gay wedding? Then they want their rights to do what they want with their business.
Right.
Exactly. That's just exactly.
No shoes, no service.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the no shoes, no service, that's more of a health department code than it is anything else. So that's a little bit different.
I think the principle, the freedom of our corporations is unchallenged, and they should know that.
Absolutely.
You would think they would, but no, they only care about the Second Amendment because that's the important one, even though the First Amendment is first for a reason. That's why the Founding Fathers made it the First Amendment, not the Second, the Fourth, or the Ninth. Yeah, so Twitter was busy banning a lot of people. Michael Flynn has been banned. Trump attorney Sidney Powell has been banned. They are getting rid of all QAnon content as fast as they can right now. And it is just, it's now turning into... Businesses are starting to get rid of everything Trump. I've got this story. This is Catherine Thorbeck writing for ABC News. This story is dated January 7th. The e-commerce platform Shopify said last week Thursday that it has terminated stores affiliated with Donald Trump in the wake of pro-Trump supporters, many clad in Make America Great Again gear, violently storming the U.S. Capitol Wednesday. The company spokesman told ABC News in a statement, quote, Shopify does not tolerate actions that incite violence. Based on recent events, we have determined that the actions by Donald Trump violate our acceptable use policy, which prohibits promotion or support of organizations, platforms, or people that threaten or condone violence to further a cause. As a result, we have terminated stores affiliated with Donald Trump, end of quote. Company confirmed that TrumpStore.com and shop.donaldjtrump.com were removed. The latter is the official shop of the Trump campaign. The former is run by the Trump Organization. So if you click on those pages, you get an error message, probably a 404 error. Shopify, a Canadian-based company, powers the back end of online shopping sites for more than 1 million merchants and catapulted in popularity amid the COVID-19 pandemic as many businesses were forced to pivot toward e-commerce. So this is amazing stuff. Now the businesses have said they've had enough. I don't know if you've heard, but the city of New York has canceled a bunch of contracts with the Trump Organization, including the operation of ice rinks in Central Park, a golf course in Brooklyn. Trump's starting to lose money because of his shenanigans.
He's officially become their scapegoat, and money is just the beginning. He's going to end up dead or in prison, and they're going to use him as long as they can, though, in my opinion, because the people that have the data for these right-wing extremists that are manipulating their behavior right now, with the data that they stole from them over the past few years, they're doing the same thing to Donald Trump. They're manipulating his behavior as well, but he's too egotistical to see it. He knows why he won the election. He knows they use that data against those people, and that's why he's got this cult following him. He's just so egotistical that he can't accept or understand the fact that they're doing the same damn thing to him. So now that he's thrown out with the trash, he is going to do what Donald Trump does, and he's going to publicly disintegrate, right? And they're all going to go, look at this crazy guy. He did all this. But ultimately, I think they've still got complete control.
Yeah, that's sophisticated and absolutely true. I'm sitting here, though, with a buddy in Lansing that's terrified there's going to be a bigger show of idiocy than the 6th. Mm-hmm. And, I really think we can get Trump out of the White House and and we can get the business connections broken, but can we get Trump out of the horde of idiots that live in the hollows and gullies of southern part of the United States, and when will that happen? I'm not very optimistic right now. I hear the good news and I see Trump disintegrating, but I'm just holding my breath. You know, it reminds me, Darren, the first time we ever talked long distance on the telephone. I don't know if you remember. I was in Philadelphia. Actually, I was in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, having lived through the protests there at the Bernie fiasco.
I remember that because you had called in. That was the day that Tracy Kornack, the former 3CD chair, called into the show while we were at our local affiliate and used a fake name to start. Why don't we start singing Kumbaya? Why are you attacking fellow Democrats? And I hung up on her once her identity was made aware to me, and several callers called in and really berated her, specifically Andrew Anselman really got on her case.
Yeah, that was an exciting time. But, you know, I remember how fatigued I was sitting there outside of an Amish bakery and just recounting the 3-day struggle in the heat and just equating that to the struggle for our country without Bernie and with the neoliberals back in the driver's seat. And I thought that was an all-time low. And I sit here now, again on the phone by necessity, but nonetheless, and have the same fatigue. I'm just worn out with the Trump teeter-totter and today's threat this weekend, you know, kind of on the verge of possible more violence. We just get all of the reruns in our mind with the fire extinguisher smashing into a person's head, and you know, we just get it all summed up and how many arrests there are, and now it's like a week later for wave 2. So you know, I've had trouble. I've had just trouble getting my eyes up with any hope that we can rid the Trumpism that still plagues large swaths of our country. I can theorize what's going to happen, but I've got to see some results.
Mm-hmm. I think we all do at this point.
I wish I had something optimistic to throw in here, but all I have is a really serious warning. I've spent the week doing what I do and reading and trying to connect dots, and the ones I connected are worse than we've even imagined.
Wow.
You should take a second to look up the Belt Road Initiative, One Belt, One Road, that China's been working on since 2013. It currently has 140 countries involved that have signed on to their MOU to do a global infrastructure program. Eric Prince is heavily involved. It's why he's on the board of Frontier Global Services, which is Xi's army.
But China's our enemy.
Listen, China is Donald Trump's enemy right now.
Mm-hmm.
He is. Okay, but think about this, because what happened when Eric Prince teamed up with Xi is that he added security and healthcare, global security and healthcare infrastructure to the plan. Okay, mm-hmm. Because healthcare infrastructure, his sister's got that all under control, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then, think about security. He's already got the private armies. So when I started looking at that, I started going, okay, I don't feel that coronavirus, Black Lives Matter protests, and this white supremacist cult are all just random, separate things happening at the same time. What I believe are that the people with the most money, power, and weapons are orchestrating the demise of society in the U.S. Every single country involved in the One Belt, One Road initiative is outside of North America. There is not a single North American country. What are they going to do to North America if they're not putting us in their global infrastructure program? Where does that leave us?
Yeah.
That is a dead serious. And my fear is that this weekend is when they're going to take control of all of our informational systems. I'm on the City of Wyoming Housing Commission, and I went through the paperwork this week looking at stuff, and one of the things I noticed is that one of the technology companies that we switched to recently is actually owned by Constellus. That's the parent company. It's a military type database that's now we're paying thousands of dollars through the City of Wyoming. Blackwater has contracts for putting in all of our water pipes, all of our big major infrastructure. So I'm worried that they're just taking all the money they can get from here, all the resources they can get from here, the fresh water they can get, and they're taking it to the other continent, and they're just making plans to end it. And there is nothing I've found to tell me that's not the case. So I hate to give everybody such a dire possibility or outlook, but these are facts. These things are happening. These people are working together. You can look up Bob Mercer. I've talked about him a lot the last few weeks. He organized the group that got Citizens United passed. After doing that, he moved on and had a spot in Cambridge Analytica, was working with those people. He helped launch Parler. So all of this stuff, he has all of this data to manipulate this stuff. He's also friends with Eric Prince, and he owns the largest arsenal of firearms in the U.S., and he wants to own the largest arsenal in the world. It's called Center Firearms. They're also a private military that on their homepage boasts being able to reproduce into any opposing force they want to, disguise themselves. It's really terrifying. And I'm worried that what I've been seeing with the airfields and the rental trucks are them moving guns. That's my concern, that they have been putting a lot of guns all over, so that this weekend is going to be worse than anybody knows.
Katie, that's not pessimistic. I'm like Donald Corleone. He always said, give me the bad news first.
Yeah.
And I think we have to look at it objectively.
So that's my worst case scenario. I wanted to throw that out there so that, you guys at least seen what I've seen. And now let's try to do what we can do to survive, because there's more good people than there are bad. There are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
there have been throughout history, but for some reason, the largest amount of people have suffered the greatest amount of oppression. And
Capitalism.
Darren, what's your worst case scenario? And honestly, I need to hear it.
Yeah, I'm really not sure what the worst case scenario is. We are in unprecedented times. We have not seen anything like this ever. So I'm not even going to dare try and make a prediction of what's going to happen this weekend. What I'm hoping happens is that people that are putting this country first instead of a president first or business interest first or whatever first will wake up. We're starting to see a few people that are waking up from the QAnon sleep. There was an interview earlier this week on Inside Edition. They interviewed the woman that was caught on video in a Target store ripping masks off the display. She has now totally dismissed the QAnon movement. Says they're a bunch of crackpots. She was sorry she ever got involved in it in the first place. You know what, folks? If you really want a good dose of how people get this type of thinking, how they become, I guess, weaponized, brainwashed, whatever you want to call it, there's a documentary of this out, and we've preached on it for a couple of years. I know, Jack, you and I have talked about it. The Brainwashing of My Father. This is a filmmaker who documented 2 years of her dad, who I believe voted Democratic, and I believe he was in a union, wasn't he?
Think so.
Who listened to Rush Limbaugh on his drive to work, and he's now one of these QAnon-believing right-wing crackpots.
Yeah, I keep saying it's like The Social Dilemma. Did you guys see that documentary, The Social Dilemma?
I have not.
Oh, you have to. I have not. You both have to. This is everything I'm talking about. It shows how they use technology to manipulate human behavior. Like, it shows how they'll send you notifications and have your ex-girlfriend call you and put an article and notify you that just changes your thinking right at the right time. It's scary. But what we're seeing right now, I keep saying, is like The Social Dilemma meets the KKK.
That's specific, Katie. I mean, tailor-made.
Yeah, very, very specific. And that's how, if you watch this, watch it today. I believe it's on Netflix. It is so important because even as somebody who has been researching and knows all of this, to see that movie was mind-blowing and scary. And you'll immediately change your notifications and be scared of your phone.
Yeah. Actually, you brought up a good point, and this is something I wanted to mention because I've been seeing people that are on the left, people that are progressive, just posting flat out conspiracy theory crap. I'm just going to tell you, stop reposting until you've actually looked into it. You know, I had to ban somebody from the Southpaws Facebook page because they said that Canada is under martial law. Well, no, they're not.
Wow.
So the one thing I did read is that the people who took this data and are manipulating behavior are using a process called OCEAN. And OCEAN stands for something. It's an acronym. But basically, it's gauging people based on stuff like their reactiveness and just their 5 different personality types. And so what they can do is by categorizing everybody into those types, they decide how to manipulate them specifically. And then if they get to know the person, they can, tailor it even further to the point where, you start thinking about this, they have the ability to control the behavior of an entire society. It's truly terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's quite a progress.
It happened to us, too. That's the thing we really have to talk about. It happened to us in 2016. It happened to burners. They were feeding us to incite us. And I can say that as somebody who they got. I am an emotionally reactive person. And when I would see that stuff, I didn't realize somebody was tailoring it to us, And, and was it true? Were the Democrats horrible and completely stealing the election? Yes.
Yeah, they screwed Bernie, period.
But a lot of the things that the right is saying right now is true, too. And because we're all so emotionally incited, we're not always seeing that. So it's like we really have to remember that this happened to us first. So when we see it happening to them, we kind of have to try to consider how it's going to affect other people,
Yeah. One thing I will say, and this is probably going to be the only time that you'll ever hear me say this on this show. When it comes to all this stuff, Canada's issued martial law against their citizens, or I forget, there was something else that I forget what it was. Before you repost it, do me a favor. Go to abcnews.com, nbcnews.com, cbsnews.com. If it's not there, it's not true, period. End of story. If AP is not reporting on this, it's not happening.
Yeah, but
go to the BBC PBS.
They already put out the narrative that mainstream news is lying.
Yeah. And
that's the thing. You can't... They're doing this in a way that's so hard to overcome.
Once again, it's the same proposal that I ended the show last week on. There needs to be mandatory programming on all the networks, and I'll add the cable networks too. That has history, civics, and how government works, and that's what needs to happen because we've forgotten about it. It's not taught in the schools anymore. I can't remember they were teaching government when I was a senior in high school, but there was no civics classes. They replaced it with social studies. There's no government. Talked a little bit about how the government works a little bit, but you really get an education when you get into college and you start taking constitutional law. Then you really get a good look at what happens and how it's supposed to work. Unfortunately, we have too many damn lobbyists, and that.
Well, yeah, we're currently paying trillions to a military to defend our country, and then our city is still going out and hiring 18-year-olds as security guards because they don't have anybody to protect them. And our country, our congressmen are now talking about how they have to buy body armor to arm themselves. Okay, first of all, can we just talk about what that might look like? A militarized Congress.
Yeah.
Because when you say body armor, everybody's picturing a bulletproof vest. But I'm not. I'm picturing the new exoskeleton that they just built for the military. Mm-hmm. That allows them to pick up like 2 cars at once. One person could just pick up 2 cars. Can you imagine Mitch McConnell with an exoskeleton? Can we just talk for a second about how we cannot allow this to happen?
Damn, I didn't know my own strength.
Yeah, I just took out that entire black community.
Yeah, I wish we had video because I do a mean Mitch McConnell impersonation. You think my Rush Limbaugh is bad?
I was going to say, your Limbaugh's good enough.
If you think Limbaugh is good with me, then Mitch McConnell is pretty bad. So yeah.
Let's go back though to a point a few minutes ago. You were showing that the QAnon hysteria is cracking, and if we talk about a specific mind screw, we have to look at QAnon's ability to proliferate. What causes that? What's causing now? I mean, I even heard Alex Jones tear into QAnon.
I saw that video. Listener of one of our listeners sent it to me, and I just about fell over when I saw it.
My guess, kind of, is that was too far. That was too extreme. The QAnon, and I think they're probably pulling back on it. The people who are manipulating everything, because that's the one thing that's just like everybody's like, okay, no, that really is too crazy. You know what I mean? That's my
But
only instinct.
If we're manufactured, for example, the classic Chomsky piece, the one that I had when I was in college that was a shock, was manufacturing consent.
Right.
And I obviously it's progressed or degressed, if you will, to the point that you're describing now. But the thing that I wondered is there personal catharsis that's open? I mean, are we are there people who've actually put two and two together and said, hey, there wasn't a beam of light that came down?
Absolutely. Yes. There is one. Her name's Elaine Petrucci on Facebook. She was a burner. Mm-hmm. Do you guys remember? She went completely QAnon nuts. I mean, she was Pizzagate insane, right? And she came all the way back around and pushed for Biden. Mm-hmm. All the way back around. She just said it was nuts. I can't believe I got sucked into it. I'm embarrassed. So there's at least one person.
That was pretty much what that lady that they caught ripping down the mast at Target said. I can't believe I got caught up in this.
Wow. So, yeah, I mean, there is definitely an opening for us to, pull people back and change the narrative. But we don't have a lot of time, I don't think. I think we need to move.
No, we don't. I want to read this story. This is from Inside Radio. This is a trade publication that's owned by Gannett, or they're actually owned by Tegna, which is the parent company of WZZM-TV, but they report on inside of the radio and television industry. I've got this story. This is dated January the 8th. When CBS News Radio DC Bureau Executive Editor Steve Dorsey showed up to the Capitol building Wednesday morning, he knew he had a hectic day ahead of him with the outcome of the Georgia Senate race still in the balance and the contentious certification of President-elect Biden's Electoral College victory looming. Little did he know he would be locked in the House radio and TV correspondence gallery as armed pro-Trump rioters stormed the Capitol. Now, let me stop there for a second. Let's call them what they are. They're traitors.
Right.
Terrorist traitors, yep.
Ironically, Dorsey would have to go through several layers of security and barriers to get to the press workspace across the hall from the House chamber where broadcasters set up shop to report. He told Inside Radio, quote, "That's why it was so surreal that we heard protesters, not outside but inside," end of quote. Hearing all the commotion, Dorsey stuck his head outside the door and saw Capitol Police running through the hallways, going door to door and locking them up, before he was ordered back inside the gallery and told to secure the door. As the USA, USA chants of protesters echoed through the Granite Hall, Dorsey says he heard police yelling and people thumping on doors. Quote, "I couldn't tell if it was police checking on the locks or it was protesters trying to get in," end of quote. Around this time, correspondents in the gallery were beginning to see photos of protesters making their way into the Senate chamber on the other side of the iconic building. But locked down in the gallery, Dorsey and others were in the dark about what was transpiring in the House chamber they were adjacent to. That is until they viewed photos from journalists showing scenes TV viewers were getting a glimpse of at home. Officers with their guns drawn at the barricaded entrance to the chamber as the mob outside pounded on the doors and broke the glass. Dorsey said, quote, "I've been in a lot of dangerous situations in places like Moscow and Istanbul, but what really set in was the surreal disbelief that maybe we weren't so safe inside the Capitol," end of quote. From a window, he and other members of the press were able to see demonstrators gathering on the west front of the Capitol building and climbing onto the structure constructed for the January 20th presidential inauguration. He said, quote, "We heard the flashbang grenades go off. We saw the smoke rising above the crowd. We saw police remove their bike helmets and replace it with a gas mask. That's when we knew things were getting more serious," end of quote. Just going to stop here for a second. Could you imagine being in that building when all this is going on?
There was a Intercept article yesterday that showed the John Sullivan, a.k.a. Activist John. Everybody in the Black Lives Matter community in his hometown hates him, thinks he is a grifter, doesn't believe he's really in it for the cause, but for whatever reason, he's the one whose video went viral of the lady getting murdered.
Oh, yeah.
So
yep.
He's basically, in the video, he's cheering, he's totally extreme right-wing, he helps him break into the Capitol, but then you can also find videos of him at Black Lives Matter protests. So the right-wingers have taken a hold of this, and they've said that he is the Antifa guy. But honestly, you guys, here's the thing. Is he a mercenary? Was this guy paid to go in and start this trouble? Or did they just tailor and manipulate him psychologically? And but regardless, regardless, it happened. And he was the one that was shouting, get in there, guys, let's do it. And that's what you do if you've got group mentality and one person that's willing to make the first act and start yelling. That's all it takes to incite the group to do what you want.
Yeah. Let me continue the story real quick here. As the chaos inside and outside the Capitol building escalated, Dorsey was broadcasting live on the radio, talking with White House correspondent Stephen Portnoy. In what Dorsey described as one of the most emotional parts of the day for him, the commotion outside the press gallery subsided and there was a loud pounding on the door. Quote, they thumped on the door like they were about to break into a home, wanting us to open the door, and we were all hesitant to open it. How do we know they were actually Capitol Police? End of quote.
Even if we did, how do we know they don't want to kill us anyway?
Exactly. Because how
No guarantee there.
How many police and firefighters have been involved in this?
That just weren't in uniform. Exactly.
Yeah. Did you, stopping here for a quick second on the story, did you guys hear or see the firefighter, I forget what city it was, that they've got him on video taking a fire extinguisher and beating a cop with it?
Yep.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah. But, I think, to me, right now, what's really pertinent is the so-called tour guides that were Republican legislators and congressmen.
Mo Brooks
that kind of
that's treason.
Of
Blatant.
Insurrection, is shocking.
Treason.
Yeah. I wonder where that's going to head, if they're really going to pursue that far enough.
They better.
I think psychologically this is what's happening right now, you guys. All of these huge things are going by us. They're all being allowed, right? And it is manufacturing consent. It is. Because they're letting all these big things go by, and what do they got us fighting over? Little things that don't even matter. We're all discussing Trump, who is completely canceled and completely irrelevant. We're all discussing all these things that are they're not important. But in reality, we've got treasonous congressmen. We've got a treasonous president. The Peter Meyer thing.
That's the core issue. That's the treason inside the system of our government and in the police forces. That's really the tantamount. That's important.
Yeah, 2 Seattle cops have been arrested. They're being charged with going into the Capitol. I mean, this is happening all over. Let me continue real quick here. The gallery director opened the door, and the police told Dorsey and the 10 to 15 others in the room they had to evacuate. Connected via FaceTime, Portnoy could see and explain to the radio audience what was happening as Dorsey tried to gather his tools and exit. The crowd was led through the famous underground tunnels that connect most of the buildings on Capitol Hill. Quote, it felt like miles of tunnels and escalators to get to another press workspace that wasn't being used in the Rayburn House office building, end of quote. They holed up there for a few hours until things cleared up and were then allowed back into the House chamber. A big part of the Capitol siege story was visual, the size of the mob, windows being smashed, police in riot gear, protesters climbing the Capitol, insurgents in the halls of Congress. But Dorsey contends that radio has the benefit of sound and live reporting capabilities that TV doesn't have. He explains it this way, quote, you can go to places in the Capitol that live TV cameras can't go. As I hand my ear to the door that separates us from the hallway and the House chamber and police clashing with protesters, so was my microphone. The listeners were hearing the same things I was listening to. They were there with me. It was a very personal, intimate experience that you can't get with any other medium, end of quote. Well,
that's a good read. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, it's I couldn't believe when I saw this. It's like, wow.
Yeah, I was watching, like I said, on C-SPAN, and that not having cable, was really just eerie to see that happen and not have any of the narrative or have it jump to an opinionist or editorialist. It was just, wow.
That would have been powerful, yeah.
Very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've just got a story that was just sent to me by one of our listeners. I'm waiting for it to open up here. But yeah, now the FBI is saying, we're going to get all of you. And they've been going at it. They've arrested 100 so far. They're looking at least 200 more at this point. They've had tips coming in from everywhere.
But why aren't they going after the ones doing it? You know what I mean? Like, here's the thing. If the FBI is going to save us, then they've got to go after more than just the people that walked into that building.
Yep. They need to go after
they're
the
all
ones
we've got.
You mentioned the Pentagon. this is just amazing stuff here. One of the congressmen called and said, hey, we need boots on the ground now. And they're like, well, we got to run it up the chain. No, you don't have to run it up the chain. God, you can't see what's going on television? It was just, if it was an abject failure, I'm sure it was by design.
Exactly. There's just too many, I already talked to Darren about this before the show, but the Peter Meyer news conference last night, press conference where he's talking about how he's going to get the protective gear or whatever because, he wants to make sure everybody's safe. I'm sorry, but I was so angry watching that because I cannot believe, no matter what you try to tell me, that an Army Special Forces vet, a billionaire Army Special Forces vet, couldn't just walk in and ask for what he wanted. He could. Mm-hmm. He absolutely could. And they were playing up for something, and I think they're building a case for more privatization of the military, but again, imagine what that would look like with Congress militarized.
Yeah, that's not a good thing. Oh, boy. Yeah, one thing I want to get to is, did you hear about the robocalls that were sent by the Republicans?
Oh, yeah.
This is some disgusting behavior. I'll cover this real quickly. This is Laura Strickler and Lisa Cavazuti writing for NBC News dated January the 8th. An arm of the Republican Attorney General's Association, a national group representing the top law enforcement officers in their states, sent out robocalls encouraging people to march to the U.S. Capitol the day before the building was stormed by a pro-Trump mob. In the recording obtained by NBC News, the voice said, quote, "At 1 p.m. we will march to the Capitol building and call on Congress to stop the steal," end of quote. The calls, which did not advocate violence, bullshit, they didn't. Right there is advocating for violence. Oh, go down and march on the Capitol. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, no, that's dog whistle stuff right there, folks. Let me continue here. The calls also did not suggest for the building to be breached. It was sent out by the Rule of Law Defense Fund, a fundraising arm of the Republican Attorney General's Association. The group share funding, staff, and office space in Washington, D.C. In a statement to NBC News, Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall, who runs the fund, said the calls were sent out without his knowledge. This guy just took over this role of running this fund on November 10th, and he doesn't know that these calls were sent out? Unbelievable.
Of course he did, yeah.
Of course he knew. He had to have. They're just backtracking now because they know they're in deep trouble. This is just seriously crazy stuff here. I got the story pulled up now that was just sent to me. This is Ashley Coleman writing for Business Insider. This is dated January 15th. Listen to this. The dating app Bumble has temporarily suspended its political filter in the U.S. after multiple people tweeted about using it to find conservatives who took part in last week's Capitol insurrection and turn them into law enforcement authorities. So now they're searching on Bumble for these idiots.
But why are they turning them into themselves? What's the point?
Oh, my God.
But where do we stand as we, on this weekend coming up, all you hear about are the big playoff games in the NFL, all the action to come this weekend. How about the action in our state capitals? I'm just curious where you think this is going to head contemporarily. I mean, within the next 72 hours. This is the 15th.
Yeah, I think they're going to take this time as soon as the extreme right-wingers start to cause disruption at the capitals. I think that the people in charge are going to take the time to take over control of our data systems here in the U.S. I'm not sure if they will interrupt the grid or resources like water and natural gas, oil, but I do expect that they will be taking over control. There's a scheduled maintenance for the USGS site that starts on the 19th at 6 p.m., and it's supposed to be back up at noon on the 20th.
So using the smokescreen of the violence and the attention out on the lawns of the Capitol buildings.
Yep, that's what I think is going to happen. Mm-hmm. They'll either target the Pentagon, which, because they haven't discussed that, they're only discussing the capitals and the national capital. That makes me think it's a very good possibility. But they've already got people employed in all of these agencies, in all of these places, and I think it's mainly just going to be about taking over control of the navigation,
I want to try and get to another story here. There's an article at Huffington Post. The headline reads, House Democrats briefed on 3 terrifying plots to overthrow the government. This is some scary stuff we're living in right now, folks. I never thought we would be at this point. But, are we really surprised?
No,
not at all.
We're the ones that have been saying this is why we can't let any of these things happen as these things keep happening.
I mean, years ago, I was the one that got on the air. One of the first things I said when we started this show was, it's going to happen sooner or later, but there will be civil war in this country, and I hope I'm not around for it. Unfortunately, I'm around for it, I'm afraid.
I think it's worse. I think what we're seeing is the U.S. get a taste of its own damn medicine. I think everybody's turning on us at once.
Very true.
And they're leaving us all out here, and we are the one that it's going to be like, well, your leaders are the one that were killing these innocent people and causing all these coups, and so we can bomb you guys now. It's cool, just like you did to Iraq and Afghanistan. How do we argue with that?
We can't, because, we've done this to other countries. I've also said that for years.
Oh, we didn't talk about this yet, but Iran put out an Interpol warrant for Trump and 27 other U.S. officials.
A couple of weeks ago, they most certainly did. Oh. Yeah, there's just some really bizarre things going on in this world.
Well, what are those 3 specific warnings you mentioned from Huffington Post?
Let me get to that. Capitol Police briefed Democrats Monday night about 3 more potentially gruesome demonstrations planned in the coming days, with one plot to encircle the U.S. Capitol and assassinate Democrats and some Republicans. On a private call Monday night, new leaders of the Capitol Police told House Democrats they were closely monitoring 3 separate plans that could pose serious threats to members of Congress as Washington prepares for Democrat Joe Biden's presidential inauguration. The first is a demonstration billed as the largest armed protest ever to take place on American soil. Another is a protest in honor of Ashley Babbitt, the woman killed while trying to climb into the Speaker's lobby during Wednesday's pro-Trump siege of the Capitol. And another demonstration, which 3 members said was by far the most concerning plot, would involve insurrectionists forming a perimeter around the Capitol, the White House, and the Supreme Court, and then blocking Democrats from entering the Capitol, perhaps even killing them, so that Republicans could take control of the government. The members of Congress whom HuffPost spoke to Monday night were extremely concerned by the call. One member said, quote, "It was pretty overwhelming," end of quote. Officials on the call warned lawmakers about sharing too much information with the media, saying that divulging specific dates, times, and countermeasures could aid the organizers of the plots. HuffPost is not disclosing certain information, such as who appears to be organizing these plots and when they are to take place. One member was explicit that these groups were trying to get journalists to report on their demonstrations. As we've mentioned here repeatedly today, they're looking for attention and to spread their message. One member said, quote, "Some of their main communications to organize these have been cut off, so they're purposely trying to get the media to report on this as a way to further disseminate information and to attract additional support for their attacks," end of quote. Democrats were told that the Capitol Police and the National Guard were preparing for potentially tens of thousands of armed protesters coming to Washington and were establishing rules of engagement for warfare. In general, the military and police don't plan to shoot anyone until one of the rioters fires, but there could be exceptions.
Wow. They printed that?
Yep.
They printed that.
Yep.
That right there is a call to violence.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying that.
Yeah.
Preparation.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's putting it in people's heads that, we're manufacturing, it's not even consent, but we're just manufacturing the scenario for you so that it's easier to step right into it.
Yeah. Lawmakers were told that the plot to encircle the Capitol also includes plans to surround the White House so that no one can harm Trump, and the Supreme Court simply to shut down the courts. The plan to surround the Capitol includes assassinating Democrats as well as Republicans who didn't support Trump's effort to overturn the election and allowing other Republicans to enter the building and control government. All of these plots may never materialize. The Capitol Police have established a new perimeter with fencing and razor wire, The National Guard has already been called in to help protect Capitol and lawmakers. And by the way, that's 21,000 strong National Guard members. It's more than what we have in Afghanistan and Iraq right now combined.
And many of
They're
them...
not going to lock horns. They're not going to charge all those National Guard. That's not their strategy. They may surround those bodies, the House, the Supreme Court, et cetera, but they're not that stupid. But they do know there's vulnerable capitals all over the United States. Very vulnerable. If anybody thinks they are adequately protected, I got a bridge to say. There's no way they don't know where those vulnerable capitals are. All you got to do is occupy one government space. It doesn't have to be the Capitol, and the kickoffs, it's off. I mean, that's it. And if they do shoot, as we just laughed a minute ago, by that provocation, if they do shoot in return fire, and I don't care who starts it, the gloves are off.
Oh yeah.
The rednecks that come crawling out of the hills, and they can do. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There's at least one person who's already been promised, if you start the shooting, we'll get you off. Mm-hmm. You know, that's just how it works when you're manufacturing a riot.
Yeah.
I guess Whitmer, breaking news, just authorized the Michigan National Guard to respond to anticipated armed protests at the state capitol this weekend.
Yeah, we knew that was coming, though.
Released by him live an hour ago. I just want to say, how do we know that the Michigan National Guard is safe? I mean, I don't trust a single military or police force in our country right now.
No. What's the Rage Against the Machine song? Some of those who work forces are the same who burn crosses. There you go. One topic of discussion was the need to put every member of Congress through a metal detector before the inauguration. A member on the call told HuffPost that there was an eyes-wide-open realization the Capitol Police needed to take precautions against, quote, all these members who are in league with the insurrectionists who love to carry their guns, end of quote. And by the way, they've already put metal detectors inside the Capitol building. Some of the Republicans are howling over it, but now Pelosi has said, here's the deal. You don't go through, $1,000 fine first time, $2,500 the next time it comes out of your pay.
Here's the deal, though. Why are we talking about protecting them? They aren't protecting us.
That's true.
I am so tired of it. Like, you guys want to be safe? Well, guess what? You better get your ass out there and do some work to make the rest of us safe. Because at this point, nobody's okay. And they're putting their lives above ours when they're focusing completely 24/7 on the safety of Congress.
Well, of course. You know,
as Congress makes moves, it's threatening all of our, safety in the eyes of the international world.
By the way, HuffPost reporter Amanda Turkle, who has been a previous guest of this show, also contributed to the story that we just talked about.
Nice.
Yeah. So, this is just some bizarre stuff going on. Can we switch topics at least for 1 minute here? Because there's a story I really, really, really want to get to. This is something we've talked about for years on this show. I just really am wanting to hear this music for the longest time. We might as well just do it. Oh, yeah. Jack, you remember this music, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. No, we're not talking about Fred Rogers. We're not talking about his widow, Joanne, who just passed away on Thursday the 14th. Nope, this music means that we are talking about the Fred Rogers of Michigan politics, only he's much more sinister. Your former governor of Michigan, not mine, because I didn't vote for the son of a bitch, Rick Snyder. Snyder's been arrested, folks, for his part in the Flint water controversy, the Flint water scandal, poisoning people. 8 other state officials have also been charged. 2 of them are looking at, what was it, homicide charges?
Was it not?
Negligent homicide.
Negligent homicide.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, 15 years, 9 charges of it, 15 years in prison for him.
That's still too light, but I understand
light.
why. Yeah.
Light. Snyder gets $1,000 fine. They classified it as he gets a year in prison or $1,000 fine. Let me think how long it would take to decide, will I pay the $1,000 or sit a year in prison? My God.
If he's even convicted.
Well, but that's why his charges are so light, you guys. Because my first thought was, wait, what? But then my second thought was, now I get it. I know why she ended the investigation before. It was because they were overcharging him on purpose. They knew they couldn't meet the case to charge him with what they were trying to put together, and he was going to get off completely. she gave him charges that she knows they can get him on. So as long as he gets those 2 misdemeanors, then it opens him up to civil liability. So yeah, he might not get the criminal punishment that he deserves, but taking all his money is just as good.
God, wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, I hate Rick Snyder.
So much. And he looked seriously surprised and upset, so that was a really satisfying.
You still hate him, Darren, after he turned on Trump, huh?
Oh, yeah.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
It's so funny watching them all turn on Trump 3 days before the end.
Yeah, right.
Peter Meyer turning on Trump was an absolute surprise to me.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I saw it about 4 or 5 weeks ago that everybody that mattered had canceled Trump.
Because it was his whole advertising campaign. Fierce supporter of Donald Trump, yeah, and now...
It got him elected.
And now, just a couple of days ago on Wednesday, 1 of 10 Republicans to vote for impeachment. We haven't even talked about that yet. Donald Trump, the first president to be impeached twice.
But
now,
why, though? Was any of those impeachments over the children that they were stealing from their parents and putting in concentration camps?
Not. No.
Were any of them about the police that were being incited to shoot black people or the Muslims that they weren't even letting? No, Congress didn't give a damn about that. We had to work on unity. But now you threaten Congress, and here we find ourselves. They got to do something about this. They got to.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, Trump's impeached. It's got to go to the Senate for trial. We'll see if
he's canceled. He's going down.
We'll see if Republicans have any guts left to convict him. But I've got this is an interesting piece that was written back on October 10th of 2019 by a Washingtonian magazine. This is by Benjamin Wofford. A nugget of political arithmetic is suddenly everywhere. 2/3 majority. This is the share of votes required to convict Donald Trump in an impeachment trial in the U.S. Senate. That's 67 senators if you're counting, or in the glass half-empty variation, the number of Republican senators required to jump ship at this time was 20. It's now 17. Probably 18 because it sounds like Manchin's not going to vote to convict because that's just what Manchin is. Scumbag. Let me continue. Mostly these numbers are used to cast doubtful sentiments on the prospect of impeachment. As CNN correspondent Manu Raju reported back at the time, convicting Trump would require support from a 2/3 majority of the Senate, a highly unlikely proposition. End of quote. The same numbers and the same conclusion have been popularized by Chris Matthews, Rachel Maddow, Chris Hayes, etc., etc., etc. And I'm going to skip down a little bit here. He says in this article, not so fast on that 67. The Constitution does not indicate that removal from office requires 2/3 of the Senate. It requires 2/3 of senators present for the proceedings. The inclusion of the single word in the Constitution's impeachment clauses shifts the mathematical ledger of how impeachment, however unlikely, could go down. It allows for the all-important 2/3 threshold to exist along a sliding scale, far from the full attendance of the 100-member Senate. In theory, a vote to convict the president or anybody else would count as legal with as few as 34 members, not 67, assuming the absolute minimum 51 participated. So isn't that interesting stuff? And this just came up again because of what's happening now.
You think the chances then are greater that he's going to be? I don't
either.
I mean, it's interesting, but I don't see it happening.
I guess my question is, what does it matter now? I think he's so canceled by both sides that he can't come back.
Well, he'll try and come back because, unfortunately, society has a short-term memory.
Right, but the people that propped him up this time are done with him. He can't come back. There's just no way.
He'll find others.
No, he'll find others, but they're not.
The guy from Parler's got a lot of money.
That's the guy I'm talking about. He canceled him. He's the reason that Donald Trump is being thrown out by every U.S. congressman right now, like even the right. That's why. Now that they've canceled him and have what they need to control his base, he is done. I promise you. He will end up in prison or dead, but they're going to use him as a scapegoat first.
The other possibility is that the Senate could vote in secret. They've said if it's a secret vote, it's going to be overwhelming. That seems like what
the Senate would do.
They said if it's a secret vote, then Trump's never going to hold office again.
Yeah, but it's.
Yeah.
I'm just like,
well, then the people that would wanting to kill the voters, the Republicans that would turn, Trump's crazies would just have to kill all the all of the senators, all the Republican senators, because they would say, "Hell, we don't know which 25 of you guys voted for impeachment, so we'll just kill y'all."
Right.
I'm exaggerating.
Well,
but
they were chanting "Kill the police" when they were going into the Capitol last week.
Oh yeah, well they were going to hang Pence.
Yeah, hang Mike Pence was a chant.
Yeah.
We've moved into Bizarro World. We're not on Earth anymore. We're on Bizarro World.
Yeah, I've got pepper spray, and I don't know what to do at this point. But
I don't know. Is there anything you really can do? Not to sound real pessimistic.
No, honestly,
but
that's where I'm at, is trying to just psychologically handle the fact that not really. There's not a lot of control we have here.
Mm-hmm. Now, we talked at the beginning. We had mentioned the First Amendment, what it is and what it isn't. I want to get to this story for last. This is David Folkenflik writing for National Public Radio, dated January the 12th. I know I'm going to butcher her name, but bear with me. Voice of America White House reporter Patsy Wadakiswara was reassigned Monday evening just hours after pressing Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on whether he regretted saying there would be a second Trump administration after Joe Biden's victory was apparent. Pompeo had appeared at the U.S. government-owned International Broadcasters headquarters in Washington on Monday to make an address. He did not address last week's assault on Congress by a mob filled with Trump's avowed supporters in his remarks, nor was he asked about it in a congenial question-and-answer session by Voice of America's new director, Robert R. Riley. To date, Pompeo, a steadfast Trump ally, has not substantively addressed the attack on the U.S. Capitol at all. As Pompeo walked out of the VOA building giving a thumbs up to a man with whom he exchanged remarks in the crowded foyer, Wadakiswara blobbed several questions. She asked what he was doing to repair the reputation of the U.S. around the world. She finally asked, quote, "Mr. Secretary, do you regret saying there will be a second Trump administration?" End of quote. Pompeo did not acknowledge the question. She tweeted out videotaped footage of that exchange which showed a throng of people around. Contemporaneous audio obtained by NPR shows she then turned to press Riley. Quote, "Mr. Director, why did you not ask any of the questions that we wanted to know about?" End of quote. He asked who she was. She identified herself as a Voice of America White House reporter. Riley responded by saying, quote, "You obviously don't know how to behave," end of quote, adding that she wasn't authorized to be there to ask questions. Her response, quote, "I know, but I am a journalist and I am paid to ask questions." His deputy, Elizabeth Robbins, replied, quote, "We're done here." And then that night or the next day, they reassigned her out of the White House. Right there is censorship. Right there is a First Amendment violation.
And I always take a huge, huge win. Like, it's a huge satisfaction to me whenever I can get a man to mention my behavior. Okay? I just want you to know that. Every single time I'm like, bam, got him. She got him good.
Oh, yeah. So, and by the way, just a quick mention, the National Association of Broadcasters is slamming the Trump administration for what happened at the Capitol.
They should.
Reporters were attacked. Equipment was destroyed. This was an absolute attack, not just on the country, but of the founding values of this country, specifically the First Amendment.
Well said.
Back to the AKA activist John that helped him break in. Keep in mind, the Intercept piece mentions how when he first went on, his Instagram account described him as an activist. Over 3 days, he kept changing it. Now he is a video journalist. And he is basically going to use try to get off because he's going to act like he was there as a journalist. So,
yeah, I'm a male model too. Bonjour. All right.
Ooh la la.
Yeah, ooh la la. We got to get out of here. We are out of time for this episode. We will be back next week. I'm Darren Gibson.
Katie Steele.
I'm Jack Prince.
For Kristen Cook, please support independent media and the First Amendment.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.